Hi everyone. I was hoping that my next video was going to be about the PDA profile of autism as an interview with my partner, but I need to do a little bit more organization on it. So this video is something else that I've been wanting to make a video about, and I've been prompted to make this video by watching a lot of other creators and some other content, and I've been noticing kind of, a crossover a lot of times with content creators talking about autism and alternative diagnoses or misdiagnoses or co-occurring diagnoses. So I wanted to make this video because there is a lot of overlap, and there are some things that just seem to kind of co-occur in autism just because of life experiences, and I guess particularly in late diagnosed autistic people that have gone through most, if not all, or a good portion of their life being undiagnosed and trying to fit in a world that wasn't really designed for us. One of the topics that comes up is looking at cPTSD, which is complex PTSD, and the autistic profile. And there seems to be quite a bit of confusion, even in psychiatrists, psychology experts, even my own therapist, getting the two kind of mixed or intertwined, and not really understanding what the difference is between the two. And I do understand that sometimes externally these things can look similar in the way that we respond or externalize some of the things that are going on as an autistic person, but internally they are different. The whys are different, and the components of each can occur at the same time, but they are distinctly different in the internal experience of the person. So I'm going to be honest, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not an expert, and this is my experience of having both cPTSD and being an autistic person, and how I've gone through and experienced the world, but I think there are a lot of translatable things. So before I realized I was autistic, I was seeing my therapist, and I knew that I was pretty sure I had some cPTSD. I had been working with a different trauma-centered therapist before, and working on body-centered techniques. It was somatic processing, which was helpful, mainly because before I did that, I didn't know how to connect my body sensations to what it the words or what it was. So and also I think there were a lot of body sensations at the same time, so I didn't, and I think that's a pretty common autistic thing. It's I didn't really understand that when my chest tightened, that I was experiencing anxiety or nervousness in any particular thing. I didn't understand that when my stomach dropped that I was sad or I was experiencing grief. I didn't know. So so I was working with somebody, and nobody ever brought up autism, despite the fact that I don't know, I think now looking back it should have been pretty obvious, but the first thing that we talked about was cPTSD. So that's complex PTSD, which usually means like a lot of cumulative traumatic incidences and not like one big instance of trauma. And we knew that, and I knew that, and I shared with my therapist that I had been bullied as a child through elementary school and a lot of middle school and even portion of high school, total like 5 years or more of being, daily bullying. So we knew that there was definitely some evidence to point to trauma. So I was recommended that I look into some resources, reading, and then like discussing it with my therapist. And I ended up getting this book, was recommended to me, and I have some commentary on it, but it's called Complex PTSD, From Surviving to Thriving by Pete Walker. And I think he does a pretty good job of outlining what cPTSD looks like. I have some critique of his methods, that being like maybe it's specific to me, but like he discusses having combating like an inner critic and an external critic. So like combating like your own feelings you might have about yourself, and then like interpreting other people's feelings about yourself, and like trying to bring yourself grace, by like accepting yourself and all this stuff. So some of his methods about quelling the internal critic are like being aggressive or assertive with your internal critic and sort of like belittling it, which I don't agree with. I don't, no offense to Pete Walker, but I don't want to speak unkindly to anyone. That includes myself and my internal self. So I don't think I would be calling my internal critic names. I would want to not attach to it, but like it just feels like if I was like being mean internally to even internal critic, that it would like pile on. I don't know. But anyways, I started working on the cPTSD stuff and starting to like kind of have some self-acceptance and some understanding of like what feelings I was having, connecting them to emotions and building skill in that area. And I had always had what I now know were meltdowns in the past, and I thought they were panic attacks before I realized I had autism. I thought they were panic attacks, and I thought they were panic attacks attached to like cPTSD stuff, and I was working on those, talking about those, and what ended up happening was that as I started healing stuff and like dealing with trauma and stuff, I started having more meltdowns, like more of them. And that was like weird to me. It was like, I am working on all this stuff and all of a sudden I'm like, having more of the stuff that was happening before. And this is where I started getting the sense that something else was going on. So, and this is where I kind of want to like delineate a bit of the cPTSD stuff and the autistic experience. If I just had cPTSD, I would be feeling like overall just everything was kind of getting eased, and I would be feeling like, I was moving through the world easier and that things were better. But actually, like, not that happened. What happened was that everything, like, all of a sudden became harder. And I understand the reason why now is like throughout like the majority of my life, I was being like consistently traumatized as an autistic person. I think most autistic people, as they go through this world, it's inherently traumatic to our brains. Our brains are super sensitive to a lot of things. And that can be like emotions, that can be sensory, that can be textures, it can be executive functioning tasks, paralysis. There's just social structures and everything that is just, our brains don't see it the same way as other people do, or interact with it the same way as other people do. So if we're not diagnosed as autistic, we're going through all the time thinking that we're supposed to like be different, and we're not, and we can't be the same as everybody else because we are not, our brains are not made that way. So yeah, it's inherently traumatic to have that assumption in your head that you're supposed to be different, and the more that you try and fail is just continuously adding like a trauma, like a micro trauma. So I, knew that like as I was healing the trauma, I realized like I started connecting with my like, feelings in my body and all that stuff and my sensations. And I was like dissociated. I had learned how to dissociate, like check out, as a coping mechanism for like most of my life. Like, yeah, just kind of like when everything was like too overwhelming to my brain would just go pause, and like I would just like not deal with the things either in me or like externally. And as I started working on like healing all of that like dissociative stuff, like I wasn't dissociating anymore. And then I was like my autistic self, which was like very overwhelming for the first, like I was showing up in the world or interacting with my autistic being, and that was quite different. So some of the first things I noticed were like I would like feel it when I stubbed my toe or something like that, like my pain, like I felt pain, which I have never felt, and I can still turn it off. I can still turn pain off. I can still just not feel things. Like if I don't want to feel pain, I can just be like, I started being overwhelmed by, I had symptoms of being overwhelmed prior, like I would get migraines, I would have like severe fatigue and things like that, but I didn't really know why. And then I started like feeling the things in real time, like the lights would be too harsh, like being in crowded places was like overwhelming. Like a lot of things I started, like it was like all of my skin had been like peeled off, and I was like uber sensitive, like all over, some of the time, like a lot, like it, when I would try to do things, I would be, I would experience the sensory information and the emotional information of other people around me, and I started having more of what I thought, before I knew I was autistic, I thought they were like panic attacks or whatever. So I think I'm about like a year, not quite a year, maybe like 8 months out from when I realized I was autistic. When I found out I was autistic, and then before that I'd been just working on like so many years of healing trauma stuff. But some of the things that people integrate into the cPTSD is like hypervigilance. They say like if you have cPTSD, you might have hypervigilance. You might, so you might be sensitive to like noises. You might have social anxiety. You might have like rejection sensitivity. Things that they are like putting onto cPTSD that is not completely cPTSD. So I don't know what a cPTSD person is without autism because I'm not that, but like we have to be really clear about not defining conditions or labels by external signs. So you have to ask the why. So is the person, experiencing distress or what they call hypervigilance to like noises and sounds because they're worried they're going to be attacked? Or is it just painful? And like physically painful. And in my case, when after I was like, managing and dealing with the cPTSD stuff, I realized like a lot of that stuff that I was like, had trouble with, was starting to experience trouble with, was not because like I was afraid of sounds, or I was afraid that I was going to be attacked, or I was afraid, that I was having in an emotionally bad place. It was more like I felt uncomfortable physically. Being around crowded places was overwhelming because I couldn't filter like sound out. And so it was like a lot of conversations going at once that made my brain feel like it was going to explode. It wasn't like I was socially anxious about people, people having judgment about me or something that is normally linked with like cPTSD and like the interpreting external critic. In fact, I didn't have any concerns about what people were thinking of me. I literally wasn't thinking about what people think of me, and I don't think about what people think of me, which is like, yeah, I don't have a very good idea of what people think of me, so I don't spend much time like really like worrying about that. And so like there was signs of people that had like PTSD or cPTSD that did not resonate with my experience. That being said, there were, as I learned what autism was, and I learned how to take care of my autistic needs, I learned where the other stuff, the cPTSD, was like a component of my experience. So autistic me has trouble with social interactions because I don't understand them that well, or I have to work really hard to understand them. Autistic me has difficulty with sensory input because it's overwhelming. Autistic me, needs scheduling, needs to know what's happening, doesn't like changes because I need to calculate my energy expenditure. Not because I'm like worried that something bad is going to happen or I can't cope. The part of me so let me go back. Autistic me, when I have too much of that stuff, I will have a meltdown. But it's a very different experience than what a cPTSD episode feels like. So a meltdown from my autistic experience of all the things that I described, if I've overscheduled myself, if things have changed unexpectedly, if I'm not sure what to do, my response is just like, it's like a gradual, like, the level gets filled up and then I get overwhelmed and I will have a meltdown, but it's more like, it's more like I'm overwhelmed and I will like have to reset my brain, and I'll probably like have to go sit in a corner and cry, and like, you know, I'll be like have to self-soothe, and through that whole process I feel the energy moving through me and out, and like in that process I feel more now that I have them, like they're separate now. They weren't always separate before. The experiences are separate now. Like I can feel like that's moving through me, and I'll be okay on the other side of it, like kind of thing. I feel like I can't stop it. I can't change it, but I can, but when I move through it, it's like how do I describe it? It's like a release or kind of a thing more than like a panicky, like a terrifying thing. It's still, I don't like it. I still don't like meltdowns, but I think they're a part of being an autistic person. But my cPTSD stuff, I can tell is different. So I still have occasionally something what, you know, would be called like panic attacks, but like in this book they call them emotional flashbacks. So the difference with this is that I don't really always know what sets off an emotional flashback, but when I look at it, when I know what it is, it's definitely like something that reminds me of childhood. And when I'm in an emotional flashback and heading up to what I used to think were panic attacks, and I kind of think that like there's maybe a meltdown on the end of my like other portion of this panic attacky thing, but it's not quite the same. So in an emotional flashback, I start, something happens, or I see something, or I hear something that kind of reminds me of like either the way that I was treated as a child, or like my experience as a child. Like one thing that kind of does usually trigger me is like seeing a child or hearing about a child being like neglected by a parental figure, or like seeing some kind of like large disconnect, or like abusive or neglectful parent child situation. That does like resonate with me. So what will usually happen is like it'll kind of, I'll see it or whatever, hear about it, and it'll kind of sit in me for like, usually it's like, you know, within the same day where I start, and then it's like the anxiety kind of will build up inside me, and I'll feel like my body is wired. Like I get like nervous energy, which I don't experience most of the time. And I always have kind of like a low leveling, like sort of, I don't even want to call it anxiety, but it's like a sort of a low level, but it's like my general baseline. So I don't really call it anxiety, but this is like, I can feel it in my body. And what correlates with that is like indecision. I can't make decisions. I feel super vulnerable. I feel childlike. I feel like I need somebody to get me out of this situation. I want somebody like external to like be around, which in my autistic like self, most of the time, I don't feel like I need anybody, and I'm very happy being like by myself, and I need my time on my own to like regulate and stuff. And but when I get into that state, I feel like the only way that I can get out of it is like through somebody else. It's very much like I am like a child. Like it feels inside me like I'm a child. And I try different things. I don't know what to do to like help myself. And it's just a very sort of agitaty kind of thing. Like I might try to like get outside, but then like I don't like being outside, so I go back inside, then what's inside isn't right, and like everything just feels wrong everywhere. And I think that the autism stuff does kind of layer into that, whereas like my sensory stuff is like heightened and all that stuff, but it's not just the autism, it's like other stuff mixed into it. And then the inner critic stuff gets loud, like, why can't you do this? How come you're not able to do that? Like everybody knows how to do that. You're just like failing at life. Like these kinds of messages like kind of start hitting me like louder when I'm in like this emotional flashback that I think is more like cPTSD stuff. Who knows? Like maybe like a year from now I'll like see this completely differently. But this is my experience. And then so the inner critic gets really loud. And if I'm with somebody else, like if I'm with my partner and I've been like, he's like trying to help or something, I like nothing that he's doing is gonna help. And it's sort of like almost annoying and frustrating. That kind of can layer onto it. And then like if there's any sort of like feeling where my like I'm vulnerable and my inner critic thoughts aren't combated, like in that state I'm spending a lot of time like logicking the inner critic away, like you can't do this, and I'll logic, yesterday I was able to, and I know that tomorrow I can't, and like so this kind of thing, like I'll be like fighting against it, but at some point like it like fails, and then when that happens, and this is like what I think a cPTSD episode feels like, everything comes like crashing in, and I feel like I fell through a hole. And there's the scene in this show, or was it the show called The Maid, where she's like at the bottom of a pit in her like visions. This is when she like has to move back in with her like ex-husband or I can't remember, but basically in like this hopeless situation, she's like at the bottom of this pit, and she like can't, she's like looking, she can't get out, and she's like way down there, and that's when it feels like where I get pushed down to. And that is like when a major external, what people would call a panic attack would look like. And those are different from my meltdowns, because this looks like I might hit the wall, I can't breathe, I'm like rocking, I'm screaming, like it's like a meltdown, but like exponentially more exaggerated. And within that time, I am convinced that I'm never going to get through it. It's like my brain has a total like it's like there's no access to anything, which is, it's similar in the meltdown, which I know that in the meltdown I can't stop it, but this is worse because I feel like within that it feels like it's never going to end. And this is like more what they talk about in emotional flashback with this book, and like what a lot of therapists that deal with cPTSD are familiar with. But it's an entirely fundamentally different causes, and it's entirely fundamentally different feelings inside, and it's entirely just like completely different. And I didn't realize before that I like learned a lot about autism, and like learned about cPTSD, that like they were completely different experiences. So I guess in summation, I don't know, it's about the why that you're having the things, and there can be like multiple whys, but for just to be very clear that that people that are autistic can have cPTSD episodes, but the things that you would do to treat them would be different, right? So like for dealing with your autistic stuff, there are things that you need to do to like take care of your brain, your sensory profile. And for cPTSD stuff, it'd be different. Like all the therapy in the world talking is not going to change that you have an autistic brain. And I think that this is the thing that like this is where like every single mental health professional should be very, very aware of all of the overlapping and co-occurring diagnoses. Even in this book, he talks about misdiagnoses, and he mentions autism, he mentions ADHD, he mentions other different neurodivergencies, and kind of like takes like an approach where like you couldn't have both, but like how is that even like possible, like to not think about that? So I think every therapist that's like treating any kind of mental health challenge should absolutely know about all of the other possibilities. Otherwise, you're going to be like helping trying to help your patient in a way that is not actually helpful for them. And then when they, like me, start working on the cPTSD stuff and things get worse, they're going to be like frustrated and potentially dump you. Like, I mean, I've had therapists be like, I don't know what else to do for you. And then I left them and I had to find somebody else that might help me. And like all of this, is very discouraging and does add additional trauma to somebody that is like just trying to figure things out. So, yeah, that's like kind of one thing I wanted to talk about. It's something that's been on my mind. I was like rereading some of Pete Walker's book, and I will say that like the strategies that he has for dealing with emotional flashbacks and even like a lot of the stuff within the book, like talking about your trauma responses, learning your trauma responses, are like super duper helpful, because even just being aware when I'm in that place of emotional flashback, knowing what that feels like to me, I can sort of like have a separation from it and be like, hey, this is not a meltdown experience. You're having an emotional flashback. You will get through this. Even though when I like am deep into it, like it doesn't feel like that. There is like a tiny voice in there that's like does tell me about that, and it does kind of help like make sure that I ride through it and not like go to a place where I definitely would need somebody to like help pull me out of it. So anyways, I think I just wanted to share that because I bet there are a lot of people out there that have both and haven't been really able to like get the help that they need to understand it, and kind of feel a little bit like discouraged by the mental health care system about it. So anyways, that's just my share, and yeah, I hope you all are doing well, and I really do hope I can get to the interview that I want to do. It's just there have been requests that my interviewee has for like formalizing the video, and I want to respect their preferences for like showcasing or the process, just because I don't want to make it uncomfortable, and I want them to be able to feel like they can show up authentically in a way that like honors their needs and preferences. So I have to work on like some way to like make my background prettier and my like lighting better and things like that. And I haven't really had a chance to get to that yet. So, all right, well, I will talk to you all at some point later. Have a great day.